right, everybody. Well, welcome back. We're gonna do to be continued. That last section of story went about a half hour, and we're gonna pick up right where we left off. I got denied getting into the military. I started using drugs. I'm about 22, 23 years old. I'm working at a plastics factory through a temp agency, and me and my friend Cameron get this apartment in St. Cloud across from O'Hara's. I start to see this girl named Stacy. Stacy at the time was probably in her mid 30s. She had a couple kids. She had just had twin boys, and she was trying to raise them as a single mom. I thought, well, I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna be the savior. I'm gonna be the knight in shining armor. And I ended up staying with Stacy for 3 or 4 years. We started to move around a lot. We ended up at her dad's house out in Elk River, which was pretty unique. I started using painkillers out there for the first time. And when I got denied to get into the military, I was really disappointed. I kind of thought like that was my destiny, is that I should have been in the Marine Corps. And I thought, that's who I am. That's who I want to be. I saw Alan go in, and I thought this is that's what was going to be my life. I wanted to be in the military. I One day out at Stacy's dad's house, there's this bathroom in the basement part of the house, and in the cabinet there was a pill bottle, and I think it might have been oxycodone or hydrocodone, and I didn't really know what that was up until that point. I was more into, occasionally doing meth, and I was drinking, and occasionally do some coke, nothing big. But then I tried one of those pills, and it made me feel like a bazillion bucks. I felt so good. I was on top of the world, and pretty soon I started to take all this guy's pills, and I had to replace him with this other kind of pill that obviously was a non-narcotic. And so I started. That's when you start to learn more about addiction and how to maneuver inside addiction, because you got to lie, steal, and cheat to stay in addiction, to keep your addiction fed. And I think that was the beginning for me to, because I had to lie. I had to put aspirin in there instead of, the pills that were in there, and getting over on people and stuff like that. And after a while, Stacy and I broke up, and I ended up living in this apartment slash house in Anoka, right off Main Street, right by the Radiator Shop, in by the Legion or the VFW there, right on Main, Old Main, by Holiday and Mauer Chevrolet and stuff. I lived in a house over there, and I was working at the cabinet shop, life going on as normal. I was seeing a few different chicks here and there, and I had this little one bedroom apartment working at this cabinet shop. And my friend Robert, who worked at the cabinet shop, was a really cool Native American dude, and he brought me over to his house one time, which is in Zimmerman, and he brought me into the back of his house. And in the back of his house, in the very back wing of the house, was this gal. And this gal, who I found out to be his aunt, was basically paralyzed. She was laid up in bed. She had had back problems, and she was bedridden, and she was prescribed copious amounts of narcotics. The one that I got from her was morphine, and she would give me morphine 30, 60s, or 90s. I think that was the increments, right? The little purple ones I think were 60s, and they had this little like coating on them, and so I would chew them and swallow them, and I got really addicted for about a year to this morphine that I was getting from her. I would come over and I would give her a bunch of money, and whatever they did with the money, I don't know. She was bedridden, so I think maybe Robert was taking some of it, but I would come over, once every couple weeks, and get just a massive amounts of pills from her. And Robert opened up a briefcase, basically like a metal box that had all her prescriptions in it, and she had every kind of medication, like every kind of painkiller, but the only ones that I ever got from her were the morphine. And I was also drinking whiskey pretty heavily at the time, so every night I would just get blasted. I would get so drunk, and I'm taking morphine, and it's a miracle and God's grace that I'm alive today to tell you guys this story. I'm living in this apartment. I'm moving from job to job, but I'm keeping that connection connection with Robert, and I started to dibble dabble with witchcraft at the time. I got this witchcraft book, and I had this little nook, this little like closet in my house that I was renting, and I had it all set up in there. I had a table, I had candle, I had skulls, I had the book. I was trying to get more into that, and of course, your headspace at that time when you're using drugs and alcohol is dark. It's a really dark time in my life, so I am therefore doing dark things and inviting dark things into my life, and it's rather interesting as I look back now because I was really intrigued by the whole witchcraft thing, and I really got into it for a minute there. But then, I started seeing this girl at the temp agency, and she will remain nameless. But I started to see this girl at the temp agency that I was working at, and she kind of helped me get off helped me get off the morphine. She was very encouraging. She was really helpful. She was almost like a motherly figure for me. And it took a while, but I cold turkeyed the morphine, and I went through some of the worst withdrawals that I had ever been through in my life. I was seeing things auditorily, visually. I was physically hurting so bad, and I didn't realize alcohol is not a good thing for your body. So while I was coming down off the morphine pills, I was still drinking. I think coming down off the morphine and the alcohol at the same time probably would have been quite the challenge, but I was still drinking whiskey. So I got off the pills, still drinking whiskey, and one night the lady that I was seeing at the temp agency, she actually had a boyfriend, and they lived in Zimmerman, and she invited me up to their house for the weekend to go snowmobiling, go bar hopping, and that sort of thing. And so I came up and I started hanging out with them, and we went to this bar, and I met this girl named Erica. Erica's my first wife. I ended up marrying this gal later, right? We hit it off right away. She was there with some friends, and she was there. Alan, the guy who went into the Marines, his future wife is Erica's best friend. So not only did me and Alan have girlfriends who were best friends in high school, but later on in life, our wives would be best friends too. And that's how Alan met his future wife, and all that is through me and Erica, because we set him up with with this gal. So I met Erica. She tells me she's a high school teacher. I'm like, oh, that is really intriguing. Most of the people that helped me in my life were teachers. And she's really cute, very bubbly, very honest, very outgoing. She lived about 3.5 hours north. She was a school teacher at a high school. She was a volleyball coach, basketball coach, very active, hiking, swimming, everything, right? She's a farm girl from North Dakota, real down to earth person. And I guess I kind of swooned her a little bit. Me and her ended up sleeping together that night, and we spent a lot of time the next day on Sunday together. I was riding around this guy's truck to bring her places and to do this and do that. And I brought her home after she stayed with us, and I made a connection with her. We went snowmobiling that night, and I made a connection with her, and she left to go back up to Park Rapids. And it wasn't long that actually she came down and stayed with me a few times. We got to know each other a little bit, and I ended up moving up to Park Rapids to be with her. I'm drug free at this point. I'm just drinking, and I'm actually kind of tamed on the drinking. I don't know how I was or how that worked, but I was able to keep all that under control. And so I ended up moving up with Erica and moving into her little house that she had on the river. I ended up getting hired at this local cabinet shop. I ended up becoming a foreman at this cabinet shop, and I kept that job for a few years before they built a Walmart in Park Rapids. And then I was a supervisor, a safety guy, a forklift driver. I was everything at Walmart. So I got pretty good pay at that time to be, to work at Walmart as a supervisor and stuff like that. It was a new store, new people. And then I got hired to actually travel around and do remodels for Walmart. So I was kind of traveling around. I got to travel around and come home on the weekends. And after a while, I joined the softball league in Park Rapids there, through the local car dealership or whatever. And I showed up one day, and we were practicing, and I ended up taking a really big swing with my cleats on, and I dislocated my knee really bad. I ended up in the hospital, and they sent me home with a bottle of hydrocodone or oxycodone, whatever it was, right? Boom, 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 flashback all the way back to when I was with Stacy, and her dad had that same kind of medication. So I took one of those, and that's all it took. I was off to the races again. So that's all it really took. I was off to the races. I think I had those pills gone within a couple days or a week, and then I had to have Erica call in and get me a refill, and that started my downward spiral that ended with me in jail years later, facing a first degree aggravated robbery charge. And so the story doesn't get better here; it continues to get worse. I get addicted to these pain pills. I'm taking pain pills. I'm taking a medication called Ultram, Tramadol. I'm taking fentanyl patches from this other guy that I found at the Walmart who had back surgery, and he had these fentanyl patches. This is before fentanyl became really big, and before fentanyl was like a powder or a pill. They would come in patch forms, and I would take the patch, and we would get all the liquid out of the patch, and then we would ingest the liquid, and it worked. It worked. It wasn't the best, but it was a high potency type of drug. That's no problemo. We got extra lights. I ended up taking pills from that, and one of the things that I will tell you in my story is that I got to be friends with the local doctor in town, and the local doctor would give me literally anything and everything I wanted, especially since I had like a busted up knee, right? So I was getting all the painkillers I wanted, and what we would do as a doctor patient is he would give me samples of this new medication called Tramadol, Ultram, slow release. Now, this stuff was supposedly non-narcotic and non-addictive, but I got addicted to it right away, and it was a good replacement for a lot of the painkillers and narcotics because they started to keep track of that stuff. Now, this is early before the real big opioid epidemic. This is in probably 2005, 2006, 2007, and I'm in the heart of my addiction. I'm going in, I'm getting samples from the doctor. He's not writing me prescription. He's giving me copious amounts of samples. Like I'm getting bags and bags and bags of samples. In fact, the day before my wedding in Park Rapids, I called him and said that, hey, I'm running out. And he met me at his office on a Saturday and gave me more what I needed just to make sure that I was okay. I would call his house. I would call this doctor's house and leave him a message saying, "Hey, I need a refill," and he would call in my refill. That's small town type stuff, right? And it really it was crazy. And I remember calling him one day, telling him that I had enrolled in college. I had rolled into online college at Rasmussen, and I told him that I had ADHD and I couldn't focus because I heard about this new drug called Adderall. It was new to me. It had been out for a while, but I didn't know what it was. And I had took one from a friend, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like basically synthetic methamphetamine, right? It's an upper." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I need this." So combined with my painkillers and my daily alcohol consumption, because I'm a full-blown alcoholic, I'm functioning at this point, right? I drink every day. I started taking Adderall, and I would get my prescriptions from this doctor, and that's kind of the beginning of the end of that whole connection because I started pounding him for this amphetamine and narcotics and all that, and it started to go downhill. And so I ended up having to go doctor shopping, and I would do that a lot. I would drive over to Detroit Lakes. I would go up to Bemidji. I would go over to Brainerd. I would drive down south. One of the things that I did was I got this motorcycle, a crotch rocket, a GSXR 1000, and it was purple and it had a really bad battery. And I would take that thing and I would drive from Park Rapids all the way down Highway 10 through all them towns. I would just blast down the highway, and I would get down to the area here, the cities, and I would doctor shop down here. I would go to different, Fairview, North Memorial, Alina. I would go to all these different systems because back then, you guys got to think in the early 2000s, they're not connected yet. The pharmacies aren't even connected yet. Like, yes, they do keep track now, and they probably did a little bit back then, but I was filling different prescriptions from different doctors at different times, and I was always very mindful and careful of what I was doing and not and careful what to do. And one of the things that I would do, and this is I've never told anybody this before, and this is probably to a degree going to be very disrespectful to some people out there, but Alan, my Marine Corps buddy, had given me one of his sets of unused dress blues, the pants and his uniform, his military uniform that had medals on it. It had his marksman medals. It had everything on it that he would have. It was just an extra set. And so he gave those to me. I would put those dress blues on and I would go into a clinic and I would act like I was a Marine, and I would get sympathy and get pills. And it worked everywhere I went. Nobody gave me any questions, nobody gave me a hard time. Nobody asked me any, and I was basically that was stolen valor, and I am very, very sorry that I did that. That is not something that I would do in my right mind. And I went around to different clinics. I would carry my dress blues with me, and I would put them on, and I must have looked just like a goon. Because although I was in okay shape, I didn't have a high and tight. I didn't even have the right shoes. It must have been a little wrinkled, probably. So some people probably knew but didn't really ask me. But I was an addict doing addict things, and I was so addicted, it got really bad. I started lying to people that knew I wasn't in the Marine Corps, and I was telling them I was a veteran, and they were like, "No, you're not. Like you never were in the Marine Corps." And it kind of gave myself a little bit of a bad reputation, and rightfully so. I guess I deserved everything that I got in that degree, and I guess some people thought I was in the Marines who I had to later tell that I wasn't, and it was a hard road for me to do that. And so I'm living up in Park Rapids. Me and Erica buy this house. I'm a full-blown alcoholic, a full-blown addict. I'm doing addict things. I'm stealing, borrowing things, and pawning it just to get money. And then before I know it, I convince Erica to take this job down at a charter school down here called Spectrum, which is in the Elk River area. I convince her to take this job, and so we move from Park Rapids back down to the Elk River Zimmerman area, and we rented out her house that we had bought. We bought a house up there in Park Rapids, and we rented it out, and then the renters trashed it, and we were never able to recoup. We were never able to get back up there and fix it up, and so we actually got foreclosed on. And this was in the 2008, 2009 housing crash, in the stock market crash. So we end up down in the cities. She takes a job at Spectrum. I'm still working with Walmart. So I go to Sam's Club, and I run into Marissa, who is now my soon to be ex wife now. I run into her at this place, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been so long. How are you? Blah, 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 blah. Get to know her a little bit. And I get to, I'm still with Erica. We're going through some hard times. I decide to check myself into Florida for treatment. I convinced these people in Florida to fly me down in Miami, go to treatment. I went down to Miami. I went to treatment in 2009. I stayed down there for like 3 months doing treatment, a little bit of outpatient, and then they wanted me to do an extended outpatient, and I said, I can't do that. I literally have to get back home. I'm married. I have to get back home. Well, I completed treatment down there in Miami. I came back up to Minnesota, and the same day that Erica picked me up from the airport, we got home, unpacked my bags, and I went out into our SUV that we had at the time, and I found a little pill on the floor, and my addiction started all over again. I think I was clean for about 3 months, and 3 months and a day or something like that, and I got home and I started using again, and that's basically the beginning of the end. Me and Erica were on. I mean, she must have known something was going on. Obviously, I'm trying to get treatment. I'm drinking every night still. I'm a full-blown alcoholic, and we move out into this cabin type place out in Zimmerman. We got a couple dogs, and I am running with the wrong people. And this is where the story gets difficult to tell, because it's hard for me to tell this part, because I started running with the wrong people, and I started running around, and we started robbing people, places, and things. I started to get a little taste for the street life, getting rough and tumble with people, and at some point in there, I got arrested for driving without a license, or driving after revocation, and I got put into Hennepin County Jail down in Minneapolis. And I got put into jail, and I was got to talking with some guy there, and he asked me what my deal was. I said, "Well, I take painkillers and alcohol." And he goes, "Well, have you ever tried heroin?" I said, "No, I've never done that. I've tried to get my hands on some, but I've never done it." And he goes, "Well, hey, once you get out, here's my number. Contact me, come down, and I'll show you how to do that." And I was like, that'd be great, because these pills are getting really expensive, and they're hard to get a hold of, and this and that. And so he got out, I got out, I called him, I went back down there. He taught me how to shoot heroin in a Cub Foods parking lot, showed me how to get the needles, showed me how to use the spoon, lighter, drugs, everything. That changed everything for me. That was like going from stage one addiction to stage five. I mean, I jumped from using pills to shooting heroin. And after that, everything started to get shot. any of the meth that I would do, any of the pain pills that I would do, any of the heroin that I would do, it would all go in my arm. So I started to use needles. I started to hide needles all around the house. I started to drink. I used to carry a eyeglasses case with a spoon, a syringe, and the drugs and a lighter in there. And I used to put that in my sock, and it went everywhere I went. Whether I was helping my wife at the time, Erica, coach basketball, eighth and ninth grade girls basketball, volleyball, whether we were going on a trip on a bus, school bus, anywhere and everywhere, family events, Christmases, holidays, we would go out to North Dakota, and I would have to bring a couple days of heroin with me, and I would leave in the morning to go do my shot somewhere, and if it was too cold, I couldn't find a vein. I mean, so many variables, right? Like in the middle of winter when we go over there for Christmas, I couldn't find veins, and we didn't have heat in our car or something like that, and I couldn't find veins, and I'm gone for like hours at a time trying to shoot this drug, and it's just madness. It's madness. People are naive to the fact that I'm using drugs. Probably just realize that I drink, and I'm drinking every day too on top of this. So I'd be getting sloppy drunk and shooting heroin and meth, and it got to be really bad. And I started hanging around with these people, and we started robbing people, places, and things. And I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the places that I robbed. I'm just going to tell you the place where I got caught. So on one Sunday, or one Saturday, Erica was coaching basketball at a place in Ramsey, and I went with this other gal who I picked up in Minneapolis. I went, picked her up. We drove all the way to Anoka, and I robbed this pharmacy at gunpoint. And I got money, drugs, every kind of drug you could think of. I got it all. I cleaned them out. From experience, I knew what to do, what to ask for, and where to go to get the drugs, because this place was, I was familiar with this place. I used it as my home pharmacy anyways, and so I knew the workers. I knew what the situation was. The owner of it was an old guy who had cancer, not very fast moving, would oblige to my, didn't carry guns, didn't have a little buzzer under it. Now again, this was before everybody started robbing pharmacies. There were some of that going on, but my situation is going to become the case where they start to try to make examples of people. So I robbed this pharmacy. I subsequently end up dropping my phone in the parking lot out of my hoodie or out of my pocket. I don't know how. My mother-in-law was the one who had our phone plan at the time. They called her and said, "Yeah, that's my son-in-law's phone. Who's your son-in-law?" It's Jesse. And so right off the jump, they know who's involved. It's me, but I'm gone. I'm long gone. I knew I dropped my phone at some point. I just didn't know where. So I knew it probably was at the pharmacy. So I was in pretty rough shape. I was really drunk that morning. I had used meth and heroin, and now I have all these prescription pills, pain pills, speed, amphetamines, everything. I have my whole trunk is full. And so I stop in Minneapolis. I drop that gal off. I give her her cut. I stop in Minneapolis. I sell some of the drugs. I get money. I get more money. I go to the Holiday. I buy a couple grand in scratch off tickets. And I sat and did scratch off tickets for about 6 or 7 hours straight. High out of my mind, drunk, not giving a shit, not having any clue about what was going to happen. I didn't even know what a felony was. I didn't know what armed robbery was. I didn't know any of that. I was fully and totally under the spell of alcohol, drugs, and mental illness, right? I was running from stuff. I wanted to be numb. I wanted to use drugs because I didn't feel good. And so, I get done scratching off a couple grand in scratch off tickets, didn't win anything. I'm out of money. I'm coming down. Well, let's take a little bit more of the uppers and let's go home and let's drink until whatever is going to happen happens, right? So I stopped by where Erica was coaching, let her know I'm going home. I'll see you when you get home. I get home. She shows up later. I'm drunk. I start drinking again. We ended up starting to watch a movie, and I'm clueless. I'm oblivious. I have no idea what's going to happen, what's about to happen. Well, Sherburne County SWAT, SWAT basically two or three different agencies got together and said, we need to arrest this guy for first degree aggravated armed robbery, right? He has a gun and all this. We're sitting there watching a movie in our bedroom. I see green or red lights coming through the thing, obviously multiples. That's it. It's over. I'm done. I get up, I run into the next room, and I contemplated suicide for the first time and really the only time in my life. If that was when I was going to do it, it would have been then. But I didn't have the courage. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. But that was basically the last time that I saw Erica, and besides her coming to jail a few times. And that was the last time I saw my dogs. That was the last time I saw any of my property. That was the last time I saw my car, any of my tools, any of the personal mementos or effects or belongings that I had as a child. Anything and everything that I had was gone. I got arrested. They brought me down, transported me down to Anoka County Jail, and that's where I sat until the investigators came and saw me. And again, I'm high, I'm drunk. I basically told them everything that, and now in hindsight, right, I should have just kept my mouth shut and got a lawyer. But I told them everything they needed to hear. They confirmed everything. They said that they would help me get a lesser charge because of this, but none of that happened. Obviously, the cops lie. All they wanted to do was hear my story, and they heard my story, and I told them the truth. I said I was going to be honest about everything, and yeah, I was subsequently put in jail for first degree aggravated robbery. I sat in Anoka County, and I sat in the part of the jail that was for obviously real criminals. It was first degree aggravated robbery. So I was in there. I was in the shoe for a little while, and then they put me in general population with still in a high charge wing. I forget what they call it in Anoka County. I don't remember what they call it, but I was in there with the other bad dudes, and I ended up getting this celly. And this celly actually taught me a lot by way of what I should and shouldn't do. And I remember. Oh man, so I'm in there. It took me a while to come off drugs, and I'm still lying to people, still telling them I'm a Marine Corps vet. And the reason I did that in hindsight is because I think I was trying to protect myself. I didn't want to get any crap from anybody, so I just told everybody I was a Marine and I was an addict and blah 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 blah. And so I think a couple of the CEOs actually took pity on me and made sure that I had my own cell and made sure that I was able to come down off of all the drugs that I needed to come off of and the alcohol. So I had to cold turkey alcohol, meth, heroin, and the prescription pills that I was shooting intravenously. So the alcohol and the drugs and everything I was coming down off, and it took me a good 3 months to come out of the fog. And once I got out of the shoe and I got back into general population, I was feeling okay. I learned a lot. And this guy who was my cellie ended up teaching me a couple things, and I actually had to fight him a couple times, and that's where I started to get some of my street smarts back, right? Because I was robbing people, and I was selling drugs, and I was buying drugs in the hood in North Minneapolis every single day. I kind of had a few situations, and one I'll share with you, and then we'll get on to part three, the redemption story. So one day I went to see my guy, and I went to cop heroin, and I owed him like $400 or $500, and I was gonna get some more from him, and he told me to come on in, and he told me to come upstairs, and so I came upstairs, and in sitting on the bed was his girlfriend with a pistol sitting right on her lap, pointed right at me when I came in the door. I came in, the door shut, and I said, "Oh crap, I know what this is." And he goes, "You're not leaving me. You're not leaving this room until you pay me what you owe me." And he left me there with this girl with this gun pointed at me. And I had to make phone calls. I had to rob Peter to pay Paul. I had to do everything I could except for basically call my wife at the time, right, to tell her that I'm getting held up at gunpoint in this trap house for drugs that I owe, heroin, white China white, right? So it took about 6 hours. It took most of the day for me to sit there to try to make phone calls. My phone died at one point. I didn't know if I was going to get out of there, and they were rummaging through my car to see if I had anything of value in there. And when they opened the trunk, they found that I had some stuff that I had from my brother-in-law, Matt. And I had borrowed a shotgun. I had borrowed a hunting rifle. I had borrowed his compound archery bow and all the arrows, and then I borrowed a bunch of tools from him. So they took the tools and the gun and everything that I owed. They took them and they let me go after scaring me and really scaring me, and they left. And what had happened was I didn't have anything to pawn to get more money for drugs, so I was pretty desperate at that point. So I actually went and copped more drugs and borrowed more drugs from another dealer. And that guy, I'm not even kidding you guys, I owed him like $400 or $500 worth of drugs. Another dealer, that guy found out where I lived, like way out of the cities, like a half hour from the cities, and he came up and he strong armed me for this 79 Caprice that I had at the time. And that was actually Erica's grandpa's car, who he had borrowed to us to let us use it. And I had to come up with the story to Erica that these guys, this was the story that I told Erica, was that I told them we were going to I had a guy that was going to come buy the car, and those guys were going to come up from Minneapolis and they were going to test drive the car, and then they would give us a lot of money for this car because it was really sought after, because it's a Caprice, right? They put the rims on it and all that. And so Erica agreed to say, okay, we'll sell the car for that much money, and then we'll buy another car and we'll pay Grandpa off for the car. Well, what she didn't know is that I had all of this planned with these guys, where they were going to come up, they were going to test ride the car, and then they were just going to ride away. I slipped them the title. They came in to test ride the car, and then because I owed them the money, and they rode away. And I had to, I told, they stole the car, they stole it. And I think we ended up actually making a police report. It was a whole big deal, but actually they didn't steal it. I owed them the money, and so they got the title, they got everything, and I have no idea where that car went, where it was, because shortly after that I got arrested, and I left that life far behind. That life, for me, I can't believe how some people go years and years and years in that life. That was a very scary time for me. I was intoxicated 100% of the time. There was not very much that I was sober for. And what's crazy is that, I was a really high functioning alcoholic and addict. It's not like I was stumbling around like homeless on the street asking people for money. Like, I always had ways and means of getting money. I always had ways and means of getting what I needed. And there was very few times where I would go without, right? Withdrawals were probably one of the scariest things that I could ever imagine going through. And so I got arrested, I get put in jail, I make it through the first, 6 months in jail, and then I get reacquainted with my sisters on my dad's side, who helped me raise the money to get out, right? Now, Erica divorced me while I was in jail. I got divorce papers while I was in jail. That's done. My marriage is annulled. I'm done. I'm screwed. All my stuff, most of my stuff was either given away, went to Goodwill, or got ruined and then thrown away, or was given to my mother, who was not very happy with me at the time. As you can tell, I got arrested for aggravated robbery. My marriage is now dissolved. I'm a wreck. I have nothing. And so I don't know if my mom was just doing it out of spite, anger, I don't know what, resentment, I don't know what, but they got rid of a lot of my stuff. I heard somebody told me through the grapevine that they burned some of my stuff, that they brought it to Goodwill. So everybody basically got to rummage through my stuff, take what they want, and then the rest of the stuff was either stored in boxes or was given away. So when I got out of jail, about 8 months into my jail stay, I was about to get sentenced in the next couple months, but my sisters on my dad's side helped me raise the money to get bailed out, and I wasn't done using yet. Catch this out. Check this out. I got bailed out and I went and stayed with my sisters on my dad's side, and I started using meth again. Now, they bailed me out using a bail company that they knew, so they weren't drug testing me, but I started using again, and I started falling back into the same traps. And at this same time, that's when I met Marissa, my now soon to be ex-wife now. I met Marissa and I started hanging out with Marissa, and she was the only like grounded solid part of my life, because hanging out with my sisters doing drugs, that was so dysfunctional. It was really a really traumatic and it was a lot of turmoil in my life, because using meth with my sister and running around in Maple Lake and Clearwater and just running and gunning while I'm on bond, right? And I'm waiting to get sentenced on a first degree aggravated robbery. I went and got the rest of my belongings that got dropped off, and I got dropped off with 2 bags of clothes and a box of mismatched shoes. I had two bags in a box, a tote. That was what I had left of my prior life. That was all that I had left. All my stuff that I've collected over the years, gone, gone, all gone. I had to start over. And I started hanging out with Marissa a little bit more, and I moved from that place that I was staying at with them, and I moved in with Marissa. For a short while, I was homeless. I was homeless while on bond, and I didn't know how this was all going to end. I didn't know anything about sentencing or anything like that. I didn't have a lawyer. I had a public defender at one point, but about a month before I got sentenced for this crime, I went to treatment. And so I basically bailed out, used all the rest of the summer, and then by the fall time, I found out Marissa was pregnant. And when I found that out, it was around August time, around this time, or around July, in July, August, I found out she was pregnant. And so from that time, I told myself, I need to get clean. I cannot do this. I don't want to go to prison. So I ended up getting clean, going to treatment, and 2 days after I graduated treatment, I got sentenced for that crime. And it was really serendipitous, the timing, because if I hadn't have gone to treatment when I did and I was still out using and abusing, I probably would have got sent to prison. But since I graduated treatment, I bailed myself out, got into treatment, did the right thing. The judge gave mercy on me and said, "Well, since you're doing the right things and you have a child on the way and yada yada yada, we're gonna hang these 20 years of probation over your head. And if you commit any crime, same or similar or anything, we're gonna send you to prison for the remainder of your sentence." So I was scared straight basically at that point, and I haven't even gotten so much as a speeding ticket since then, right? I've had a couple of situations with some people harassing me, so I've had some police contact, but it wasn't my fault. Like I didn't draw them in, and I haven't even gotten a speeding ticket, you guys. My record from the time I was sentenced on is perfectly clean, and I'm proud of that because it took a lot for me to change my life, and it took a lot of accountability. And so Marissa and me got our own apartment after being homeless late that summer. I got into treatment. We stayed at her parents' house for a while. I graduated treatment, got sentenced. We got our own apartment. My son was born, and that's where we're going to leave this. To be continued.